Hey everybody, Joe Vanourney, Cherry the Geek TV. We are back here at San Diego Comic-Con 2023 talking horror films, and we're joined by the director of a brand new horror film called It Lives Inside. It's coming out September 22nd from Neon. Bishal Dutta, welcome to Cherry the Geek TV. This movie, spooky, demonic spirits, creep me out. Talk about horror films. Why this is your first feature film. Talk about why you chose horror as a genre. Were you a fan of horror growing up? What were the films that inspired you, and why did you pick horror to be the film that was your first feature?
It's a great question. I love horror films, and I have since I was a kid, and I have a very close relationship with them because I think when I moved here, I was born in India, and when I moved here, it was really helpful to me to watch these very iconic horror films like Poltergeist or Nightmare on Elm Street, and they were really formative to my understanding of what it meant to be American, and I just became obsessed with them. And even movies that I arguably are not horror films affected me on the level of horror, like the first Terminator, which I saw when I was 5, and it just utterly terrified me, and Alien and these kinds of films. And so I've always had a deep love for the genre, even as I kind of became interested in a bunch of other things, and I did shorts in a bunch of genres. But when it was time to make my first feature, I knew I wanted to do something personal, but something that also would be really effective for an audience, a real audience movie. And so when I was coming up with this, it was this idea that, okay, well, there are certain emotions that you feel, especially when you're a teenager, that the only realistic way to convey them is in a horror film, right? And to convey the emotion that's coming out of this character. And so I was really inspired by films like The Conjuring and Insidious and Paranormal Activity, stuff that I had seen as a teenager that was just so fun to watch in the theater. And then also these great kind of layered films that you wouldn't expect. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge is my favorite of the series, Christine, Ginger Snaps. So thinking of those films, I really wanted to come up with this as just the perfect balance between a real kind of family drama and a brutal, visceral horror film.
So I've read that there are 3 things that kind of influenced you in developing the story for this. One was Indian legend, one was a personal story that your grandfather told you, and one was about your experience moving from India to the United States and growing up in a new culture. Can kind of talk about those 3 things and how you kind of blended them to create this story.
It all started with this ghost story, right, that my grandfather told when I was young. When he was a young man in Assam, India, he went to a family friend's house, and the family friend had a daughter who would carry an empty jar around and talk to it. And one day he said, "Hey, there's nothing in your jar." So she opened the jar and kind of threw something at him, but nothing came out. And, he thought, whatever, this is nothing. And so when he went home, though, strange things started happening. He heard knocking at the door in the middle of the night. He hears horses galloping around, strange stuff. And the big one was he left a pack of peanuts out one day and turned around and he hears chewing. And he turns around, the peanuts are gone, right? So these crazy things happened that drove him out of his house. So this is a story I grew up hearing. I don't know how true it is, but it certainly affected me. And, when I was starting this film, I was thinking about, well, what could that have been, right? Well, what could that have possibly been? And so looking at our kind of our mythology, there are so many interesting sort of sub-mythologies, creatures, demons, and this particular one stood out to me because I had already known I wanted it to be a high school film about a teenager dealing with their identity. And so when I found this creature that feeds on loneliness and feeds on negativity and feeds on insecurity, it was the perfect fit. It made sense with my grandfather's story. So I worked in the idea of the jar and the vessel. And from my own personal experience in high school and the experience of others that I knew that were friends or cousins or family, it really came together as a confluence of those 3 things.
Talk about you mentioned creatures, demonic creatures. The film, we won't spoil it, but there's a point where it gets revealed what we're dealing with, and I always have to give a shout out when there's practical effects versus CGI. Talk about that choice I always love it. I think that's the best way to go, practical effects, and talk about why you chose that over the CGI.
I think that for me, there's something that you can't pull away from horror in practical effects. There's something just so enmeshed about them. And when I think of really the films that have stayed with me, I think about Hellraiser or The Fly, and the practical effects and the texture of them and the tactility of them, that feeling that you could reach into the screen and feel Brundlefly, right? That reality I wanted for this movie. And I knew that it just cannot be accomplished with CGI. I think CGI can do incredible things. I mean, look at the Creatures in the Quiet Place films, but for this film, it felt very important to me to have this physical embodiment of this creature. And so I got to work with the brilliant creature designer Todd Masters, who did he did the Borg Queen in Star Trek. So he's done so many great creatures, and we just kept thinking about, okay, let's look at the cultural art, right, the religious art we have of this creature, and let's really try to think about, okay, that was their interpretation of it. How do we make this feel real? How do we make this feel like a physical creature that is in the space with us, that follows the laws of physics? And what we came up with, I think, is really the distillation of what we wanted creatively, is the distillation of anger and hatred and all the negative things within a person put into one creature. That was the brief. That was the idea.
Talk about your amazing cast led by Megan Suri. I'm curious, when you're developing the script and you've got this in your head of who these characters are, and then you shoot the film and you've cast these actors, you shoot it. How much has that changed? What do they bring to the role? Talk about casting them and what they brought to enhance the film.
I love actors, and I love what they bring to the project and the process of making the project. And in this particular case, the cast they came together quickly. Megan was actually the first person that I met for the role, and I just couldn't get her out of my mind for this character, because I could tell that based on her previous work, you could tell that she was capable of doing the kind of insecure, really likable teenage character, but then I could also see her as Ripley at the end of Alien. I could see the action hero within her, and that was crucial, right? And then these other actors that I had, Betty Gabriel, who has been so incredible in so many horror films, she brought this incredible physicality to the role, and we just kept wanting to expand how much action we gave her, because she's truly another action star. Neera Bajwa, Vixa Hay, Gage Marsh, and what I love about actors when they're collaborating on the level of story and script is that all of a sudden these aren't types anymore. These aren't stereotypes or stock characters. Each of them brought such humanity to the characters that now when I look at the film, I feel like those are real people from my life. And what excites me about hopefully one day even continuing the story is those characters and feeling like they're real people that I just want to keep hearing their stories.
So I'll wrap it up with this final question. The film's coming out in September. What do you hope audiences' reaction to the film is? What is it that you hope they take away?
For me, from the moment I came up with the thing and through the whole process, all I really wanted to do was give the next generation the experience that I had watching some of my favorite horror films when I was younger. The first time I saw Insidious, for example, or Sinister, or I remember I was 16 when the first Conjuring came out, and the whole conversation was like, this movie has no sex or bloody violence or bad language. It's rated R because it's so scary, and people would dare each other to go see it. And I remember being in the theater and yelling and laughing and that kind of experience. I want to make those kinds of movies for an audience, and in this particular case, to do the double duty of saying, okay, here's that kind of movie in its most kind of, in my opinion, pure form, but hopefully you're also looking at a family in this film that you go, that's like my family, and that people like me can watch this film, and really anyone that's ever felt different can watch the film and go, oh, that's my family. And then to be really scared within that, that's the goal.
Well, I think you succeeded on that. I think I can't wait to see the film with an audience. I had to watch it at home by myself, and I think it's going to get a lot of reactions in the theater. The film's called It Lives Inside. It's coming out from Neon September 22nd. Bishal, thanks so much for chatting with us on Cherry the Geek TV, and stay tuned for more coverage here at San Diego Comic-Con 2023.
When Tamir and I were kids, my mom used to tell us stories. The ayah said never to sleep with a bad feeling in our hearts, because there's a dark thing that feeds on those feelings.
What is the deal with Tamira? Is she doing all right?
My stomach drops every time she appears out of thin air like that. There's something in here. You can't see it. But it lives inside. Don't you hear it? You let down. It needs to tenderize the soul by attacking your sanity, isolating you from those who love you. And if anyone tries to help you, it will hurt them.
Why are you whispering?
It's listening. It's called the Pishash. It doesn't kill you right away. It eats you slowly. When it's ready,